We want to welcome everyone to our first Inside the Margin briefing. If this is your first time engaging with us, welcome. We're very happy that you're here and a part of the community. My name is Bryce Cracknell. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief here at The Margin. And The Margin is an independent, nonprofit publication that is dedicated to investigative local journalism on environmental and climate justice. And we're fully dependent on y'all's support, so thank you again for being here. I'm very excited about today's conversation. But saddened how timely it is as well, given the number of ICE raids that we've seen across the country and the massive increase in federal funding for ICE detention centers. Today's conversation will primarily focus on an investigative story that we published in May by Rico Moore called In Toxic Detention. It examines the alleged abuse and contaminated water at the Northwest Detention Center in Tacoma, Washington, and that's what we're going to dive into here in a moment. The first guest that I want to introduce to everyone today is Rufina Reyes. She is an immigrant from Mexico and La Resistencia's director for over a year now. She joined La Resistencia when she was recruited right outside the Northwest Detention Center in Tacoma, which was over 5 years ago. She became a member of LR while fighting to have her loved one released from detention. Her family won and their relative was released, but she knew that the fight continues to free everyone incarcerated by immigration and customs enforcement in our state, being Washington, and beyond. We're also grateful to have Miguel Lopez here, who's doing the interpretation for us. And then finally, who I mentioned earlier, Rico Moore. He's a freelance journalist based in Washington State. He's reported on a myriad of environmental issues, including wildlife, environmental justice, and indigenous sovereignty, and political corruption. His stories often emphasize the perpetuation and compounding historic injustices that we see here in the United States. We're grateful that Rico has published with us since our very first issue back in 2022, and he's continued to publish in every issue since. And so we partially would not be here without him, and so we're always grateful to have Rico with us, and who better to start our first Inside the Margin briefing than with Rico himself. Rico, would you be willing to give a sort of brief overview of your findings, the Northwest Detention Center, just a sort of 50,000-foot view of where it's located, history of the facility, and its location in a Superfund site?
The Northwest Detention Center, or the Northwest Ice Processing Center, which is owned by the Geo Group, was constructed in the early 2000s. It was built on top of a former site of a meatpacking plant, adjacent to and on top of a Superfund site, EPA Superfund site. It was sited in that location versus another location further to the east in the Tacoma Tide Flats of Washington State, South Puget Sound area, because neighbors didn't want that sort of a facility near their neighborhood. It was built with the full support of Democratic Party leaders at the municipal, state, and federal level, who continue to hold power today, including Senator Patty Murray. And it was built toward the end of detaining immigrants, theoretically for short periods of time before they were deported or otherwise. So then there's a dimension of the industrial nature of the environment of which it's a part, which includes being sited directly adjacent to a bulk oil storage facility that was previously owned by Standard Oil and then later by Chevron, which currently owns the property, and contaminated the groundwater via oil spill. And that has, that plume of underground water contamination has been detected in wells, groundwater monitoring wells at the current detention center's outer walls. Not to my knowledge, there are no groundwater monitoring wells beneath the facility itself, detention facility. There's also a recycling facility to the southeast that has had a lot of different issues with like lithium batteries catching on fire, things like that. So that's a huge part of the toxic exposure to detainees in the detention center is through air pollution. There's a oil refinery nearby, liquefied natural gas storage facility nearby, and a lot of heavy marine traffic with a port. So, and a heavy train infrastructure in the area that engines produce lots of diesel smoke, diesel exhaust, and there's a major highway that runs nearby, which also pollutes the air quality. And not to mention that there have been concerns raised and some complaints about the drinking water within the facility being contaminated itself. We looked at that as deeply as we could and certainly continue to look at it and seek resources to continue to look more deeply into that. In addition to the existing reports of alleged human rights violations occurring within the facility.
Rufina, do you mind speaking to how a little bit of your story? We shared a little bit of that in the article. We shared a little bit of that up top. But can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got involved with La Resistencia?
Es algo, un proceso muy largo que muchas veces ah, no estamos familiarizados, ¿verdad? Con estas cosas que están pasando, especialmente como ahorita, ¿verdad? Desafortunadamente, yo me integré a esta organización, debido a que, pues, también yo fui afectada por este sistema que es tan terrible. También fui reclutada por Marmora Villalpando en ese momento, más crítico, donde yo necesitaba el apoyo y buscaba apoyo y no sabía dónde encontrarlo, ¿verdad? Casualmente estaba Resistencia afuera haciendo un día de acción como muchos otros, ¿verdad? Ahora que he comprendido más lo que consiste estar organizando, estar levantando la voz por los demás, ¿verdad? Entonces yo en ese momento buscaba el apoyo y encontré esta organización y a partir de entonces comprendí que este sistema tan corrupto y tan malo, ¿verdad? No debería de existir. Como decía, aunque mi familiar fue liberado, pero yo seguí en la lucha. Yo me comprometí a decir que esto no podía seguir pasando, que no debería de seguir habiendo más detenciones, que estos lugares tan terribles no deberían de existir, y que no debería de existir más separaciones de familias. Ese coraje y ese, a lo mejor, temor en ese momento, aprendí poco a poco a convertirlo en lucha. Y es por eso de que yo continúo en esta organización y continúo peleando y exigiendo justicia por cada una de las personas que continúan en estos momentos, detenidas, ¿verdad? Y porque así como yo recibí ese apoyo en ese momento, sé que muchas otras personas también desean eh, tener esa ayuda, esa esperanza, un poquito de decir que no estamos solos, de poder dar un poco de alivio, el poder estar compartiendo con las personas dentro del centro de detención, escuchar sus relatos. Creemos que eso no es la solución, pero sabemos que nadie debería estar detenido y eso me mantiene aquí, ¿verdad? Me mantiene en la lucha continua cada día, eh, y creo que esto no va a terminar, ¿verdad? Hasta que veamos cerrado este lugar, que es el centro de detención del noroeste, que está ubicado aquí en Tacoma.
Thanks, Rufina. Do you mind speaking to the environmental conditions at the facility? What have you witnessed and what have you heard from people inside?
Es muy lamentable, ¿verdad? Diariamente nosotros recibimos llamadas a través de 3 líneas telefónicas, donde nos están informando el cómo esta contaminación tan mala, ¿verdad? Que se podría decir, por ejemplo, el agua donde está tan mal y contaminada que muchas veces ellos cuando tienen que beber agua porque se ven obligados a ingerirla, les causan malestares estomacales, los tiene tan enfermos, ¿verdad? Sabemos que este lugar es un lugar contaminado, por fuera y por dentro, ¿verdad? Sabemos que es un lugar que no está diseñado para poder que tengan personas ahí viviendo, tan largos tiempos. El Northwest Detention Center está en una área contaminada y no es, como decía, no es apta para que viva ahí personas, ¿verdad? El agua no es potable. Vemos que los mismos guardias cuando llegan a trabajar traen ahí sus propias botellas de agua, ¿verdad? El aire está contaminado y huele muy mal. Las ventilas están tan sucias. Las personas nos han mostrado cómo pueden limpiar y hay una capa terrible de polvo, de moho, de tanta cosa contaminada que ellos respiran diariamente. Cuando hay incendios alrededor, como ha ocurrido más de media docena de veces en los últimos años, la gente detenida nos reporta que sienten el aire contaminado y nadie les explica por qué. Y eso es terrible, ¿no? Incluso cuando ha habido expansión ahí les han puesto gases lacrimógenos en algunas unidades, ese aire se va a todas las unidades y donde pues todas las personas están expuestas a esos gases tan terribles.
Thank you. And Rico, there was something that I remember in our early conversations that you mentioned to me, speaking of fires, was reports of a fire that took place inside the detention center in the laundry room specifically. Can you speak to that case in addition to some of the other things that you've heard and give some more clarity to the environmental findings that we found? We published data visualizations of benzene plumes and other things beneath the facility that may or may not be getting into the water source there. So can you give us some more clarity as to what's taking place?
We heard reports of a fire in the laundry room, which is on the north side of the building, which most of the groundwater monitoring wells that we found, current and historic, stretching back, I think about 30 years at least, had found petroleum, hydrocarbons in that north side of that building, part of the building, the north side there where that fire was in the laundry room. And there was a detainee who was a video of him was released by La Resistencia saying that the laundry was coming back from the laundry room smelling like diesel fuel. So of course, the Geo Group won't allow state health inspectors to come into the facility and inspect water in all parts of the facility. We detail this to some depth in the story. But really, nobody really knows. There are a lot of possibilities and a lot of indications that the water is contaminated, but it's not clear entirely with what and how and at what quantities. And then what the Geo Group and ICE knows. Maybe even City of Tacoma might know about this contamination. So there are a lot of unanswered questions. We just started scratching the surface with this investigation, really, and really at risk in terms of uncovering this, for the sake of public information, is the health and safety of the detainees. So we spent quite a bit of time looking at the water contamination question for the story, did some visualizations there for the story, which, I think pretty fairly represents the groundwater contamination. And one of the key features of that is vapor intrusion, meaning that contaminated soil and whatever volatile contaminants can be in that soil can migrate upwards into cracked water pipes, foundations of buildings, and can enter into the living space of these people that are being imprisoned there. It appears to be the case that when the facility was constructed, the Geo Group didn't install vapor intrusion barriers, which is different than like a vapor barrier. It's much more robust in its ability to prevent these contaminants from entering the living space of the facility. There's just a lot of strong evidence indicating that there may be a pretty serious water crisis within this detention facility that's potentially seriously harming the health of these people who are being held there, who aren't, many of them, dangerous criminals as the president would have us believe, or his cabinet member Stephen Miller, but rather many of these people are labor rights leaders, people with who served their justice and in the past and have no real criminal record. So I think just generally speaking, regarding the environmental impacts, we have to start looking at not looking at each impact discretely, meaning not on its own. But I think what we really tried to do with this story was to show how, because the people in there aren't just affected by the polluted air that, depending on what's happening, or the polluted water, potentially polluted water, they're also contending with a whole host of other alleged human rights abuses. And so I think we have to start thinking of the cumulative impacts that these people are experiencing as one impact.
Not only just documenting the alleged abuses, both from the environmental lens, but also what we found on the human rights side of things. The article also makes a strong argument with regard to how ICE and the GEO group are making hundreds, if not billions of dollars, hundreds of millions, not billions of dollars off of this kind of detention. And for those who have followed the recent legislation that just passed the House and the Senate, otherwise called Trump's Big Beautiful Bill, it allocates $170 billion to immigration enforcement. And an NPR analysis found the bill allocates $75 billion to ICE specifically. And that's a 265% increase of ICE's previous budget, making ICE the largest federal law enforcement agency in the history of the United States. Of that 75 billion, 45 billion is allocated to the immigration detention centers, just like the Northwest Detention Center. The Hill, they found that there are currently roughly 56,000 migrants in detention centers. And this bill is expected to increase that number, or to add an additional 80,000 to 100,000 new beds, which averages to a cost of $500,000 or $500,000 a bed. And the private prison facilities, specifically the GEO Group and Core Civic, are poised to make billions of dollars. And Rico, can you speak to just what you found, especially when we asked GEO Group about these allegations and some of the things that they told their shareholders the last time that Trump was elected? How then do they respond, especially anticipating that this money would come?
Yeah, I'd say that money is absolutely at the core of this story that we wrote, and which obviously is simply just a mirror of what's going on. There are, well, first, to answer Bryce's question about Geo's responses, they provided general responses. Of course, anyone can read in the article that's posted online, but they didn't respond substantively to each individual finding of the story. They provided kind of blanket denials to our very, very numerous pointed questions, and didn't respond directly to questions about water contamination in particular, which is interesting. I would say that as far as the specificity of companies that are profiting and individuals who are profiting from the mass deportation industry, if you will, obviously GEO Group stock jumped after Trump's election. His attorney general was a former lobbyist for GEO Group, but other companies as well. Palantir is one company in particular that has benefited from government contracts with regard to the migrant deportation effort. CEO donated money to Trump's campaign, and then Trump's close advisor, especially with regard to immigration, Stephen Miller, in a recent financial disclosure, revealed that he holds somewhere between $100,000 and $250,000 in Palantir stock. Palantir was recently awarded a contract to aggregate a lot of data across different agencies. So you have someone like Stephen Miller, who's from the start been involved in Trump's speech writing and ginning up this anti-immigrant sentiment, having financial benefits from the policies that the Trump administration is rolling out. And what we're seeing, I guess, is the profiting of people as if they were commodities, being put into these facilities, and more facilities being built, more government contracts for um, and funds being earmarked for more detention facilities. And I think in our story, I think Maru really, spoke to this as near the very end of the story, comparing people being imprisoned in the detention centers like as if they were boxes. And that same kind of analogy was used as well by a government official regarding indicating that these people are not really being considered people, but commodities. That's something that should give us all, significant concern.
Bueno, sí, sabemos que esto va a seguir y seguir, pasando, ¿verdad? Y cada vez y cada día está siendo peor y terrible. No lo sé, es algo que con lo que siempre nosotros como Resistencia, hemos tratado de lidiar, ¿verdad? Y de decir que esto no es un sistema nuevo, que apenas inició, es algo que ya venía pasando, ¿verdad? Que sabemos que no va a parar, pero que ahora más que nunca vamos a seguir luchando y peleando para poder combatir no tan solo el sistema, sino que necesitamos, porque esto no va a terminar, ¿verdad? Sabemos que debemos de cortar de raíz, ¿no? Y cortar el sistema desde el principio. Y siempre decimos que no queremos un sistema reformado, queremos acabar con el sistema. Por ejemplo, desde que abrió el Northwest Detention Center en el 2004, han habido 4 muertes registradas. Una en el 2006 de una persona mexicana, otra en el 2018 de Amar Merganzana, quien se suicidó en aislamiento mientras estaba bajo vigilancia por intento de suicidio. Y solo el año pasado murieron 2 personas más, que fue Charles Leo Daniel, después de haber estado en detención por 4 años y 4 años en aislamiento. Y luego José Manuel Sánchez, el 27 de octubre del mismo año, el año pasado, estuvo en aislamiento por 5 días. También en el 2004 vimos una ola de intentos de suicidio. Todavía había más negligencia médica, un incendio dentro de las instalaciones y la llegada constante de ambulancias, la cual continúa hasta hoy día. Tan solo el sábado pasado, que tuvimos un otro día de solidaridad afuera del Northwest Detention Center, un carro de bomberos y una ambulancia llegaron en medio de nuestro rally y la ambulancia se llevó a una persona detenida al hospital. También nos hemos dado cuenta cómo las huelgas de hambre sirven, a pesar de que es algo muy terrible, donde las personas pueden perder la vida y exponen su vida, pero desafortunadamente son obligados a hacerlo para exigir sus derechos y exigir mejores atenciones, ¿verdad? Y sabemos que sí sirven porque se liberan a personas y ICE quiere dizque negociaciones con la gente detenida con tal de que la gente pare. Las negociaciones usualmente resultan en cambio de menú por una semana y luego regresan a lo mismo cuando les quitan los microondas y no les dejan usarlo para calentar sus comidas que compran, ¿verdad? En la tienda llamada comisaria, ahí dentro del centro de detención. eh, Ellos están de cierta forma haciendo esa negociación y les cumplen, aunque sabemos que no van a tardar por mucho tiempo, pero todo eso ha funcionado y lo hemos mirado, ¿no?
Thanks, Rufina. There are folks who are here from Tacoma who are listening. There are folks from Seattle. as well. And a lot of questions that we've received are folks who want to know how they can help you all in trying to shut this facility down. And there are folks across the country who may not know that they have a detention center in their own backyard, or that they may sadly have one someday soon. Currently, there are over 100 detention centers across the country, and given the number of beds that the Trump administration wants to build, we know that number will increase significantly. So for folks who share your resolve and your fight to want to close these facilities down, how can they help you, and what can they do in their own areas to try to do the same?
Sí, claro. Bueno, hay muchas formas, ¿verdad? De que como comunidad podemos apoyar a las organizaciones y especialmente a las personas que están actualmente en el centro de detención. Por ejemplo, tenemos a nuestros Freedom Malls. A la gente participa, aunque muchas veces no ganamos, ¿verdad? Y otras cosas que hemos logrado, la liberación de la gente. Lo más importante de esta lucha es que la gente se atreva a levantar la voz contra las condiciones de detención y el público se entera de dichas violaciones de derechos humanos, ¿verdad? Entonces, cuando vean esos freedom malls, debemos de llamar y hacer el llamado a la acción a los políticos, a quienes correspondan, ¿verdad? Para que puedan hacer que estas personas sean de alguna forma liberadas. Bueno, también hacer el llamado, ¿verdad? Contra las represalias que estamos teniendo por parte de GIO, ¿verdad? Como cuando tenemos nuestros días de solidaridad y están cerrando nuestras calles porque no quieren que estemos en apoyo a las personas detenidas. Es llamar a la ciudad y no permitir que GIO Group se salga ah, con lo que ellos quieren, ¿no? Como poner barreras en las calles y no impedir que las personas vayamos y protestemos. También cómo ellos están robándose y haciendo represalias contra nosotros como resistencia, como se roban nuestras placas, ¿verdad? Como se robaron la placa del señor Charles Leo Daniel, la desaparecieron por muchos días y no nos daban información sobre ellos. Cuando hacemos el llamado a la ciudad y ellos nos dicen que no tienen ninguna información y después cómodamente nos informan dónde está, ¿no? Y eso quiere decir que ellos están en comunicación de alguna forma con las personas eh, que hacen todo este tipo de cosas contra nosotros y como organización y pues también que luchamos por las personas en el centro de detención. Bueno, también hacer el llamado a nuestros legisladores, que deben de seguir buscando las maneras de formar leyes para proteger a nuestra comunidad aquí en el estado de Washington. Eh, Necesitamos seguir exigiendo que sigan buscando la forma de que la policía no coopere con los como agentes de ICE. Entre otras cosas, ¿no? También a los congresistas federales, cómo piensan a ICE y cómo piensan parar a ICE y su reino de terror contra nuestra comunidad, y qué piensan hacer para cerrar el Northwest Detention Center, ya que y no permitir la renovación del contrato, que este contrato se va a renovar en septiembre entre GIO y ICE. Entonces debemos llamar y pedir que no se renueve más el contrato.
Thanks so much, Rufina. And as we're running up on time here, again, I just want to thank everyone for being here. Definitely follow La Resistencia on social media and follow them on their newsletter as well to see what those calls to action are, and also get involved with your local immigrant justice and environmental justice groups, and stay in touch with us. So follow us on social media as well. We'll be having a fall issue coming out in a few months. So look out for that in October or November. And we're excited that we'll be continuing this investigation a little bit deeper. And I'll let Rico sort of give us the last word as to giving a bit of a preview as to what we're looking into. And we'll send you all on your way. Thank you again.
Thank you. Yeah, I would say that without, saying too much about what we're, looking into, certainly the environmental contamination and exposure of detainees to that pollution, the lack of transparency broadly, certainly financial dimensions are all within the scope of the ongoing investigation, amongst other factors. But very, very, very glad to be continuing to look into this story.
Absolutely. So read the other story if you haven't. Check out the maps that we publish. We also publish some of the 911 calls that we've received. Sadly, there's hundreds more. And so we'll continue to do a deep dive into this facility, knowing that it's also emblematic of a number of other detention facilities across the country. We can't thank y'all enough, Rico, Rufina, Maru, who's in the back, and Victoria, who helped put all this together. Miguel, for your translations this evening, and for everyone here in the audience. Follow us on social media again, sign up for our newsletter. And if you continue to support this work, consider making a donation as well. We'll have another Inside the Margin in the next month or so. So stay tuned for that. And we, again, just really appreciate everyone's time.